Guns going off by themselves used to be the punchline you'd hear from an anti-gun pundit who's never field-stripped a pistol. Then came years of footage, independent benchwork, and even federal paperwork that ripped the varnish off the sales brochure. So ask yourself, are the pistols trusted by cops, soldiers, and everyday carriers really as bulletproof as the marketing team swears they are? In this video, we'll talk about how the industry got here, starting with SIG's P320 mess, moving through the FBI's SEAR movement bombshell, and ending with modern testers showing just how close some striker guns can skate to an uncommanded strike. No spoilers, but we're going to connect the dots you're not supposed to connect. And once you see the pattern, you won't unsee it. When the P320 fiasco first hit in 2017, plenty of folks tried to dunk on it as internet drama. Then Omaha Outdoors rolled tape and the excuses started shrinking. No lab cosplay, no smoke and mirrors, just primed cases and controlled drops that strip away the noise and leave you staring at ignition events the gun should never produce. They didn't cherry-pick a lemon and call it science. They ran peer guns, multiple generations of Glock, well-used M&Ps, HK VP9s, even a 1911 TRP, then bounced them off hard surfaces at angles the old test books never imagined. Those stayed quiet. The P320 coughed a primer. That single contrast is the hinge the whole debate swings on. The takeaway wasn't that the rest of the market is divine. It's that side by side, under the same off-axis, the P320 flinched while the others kept their composure. SIG responded with a voluntary upgrade program, a phrase you use when a recall would cost more pride than you're willing to pay. Lesson learned? Drop safety isn't a favor to customers, it's table stakes. And the century-old test grid that never contemplated modern striker geometry was no longer enough to catch real failure modes. That's the reason this argument never died. Rumors fade, patterns don't. Lawsuits stacked up, agencies compared guns and notes. Independent tinkerers, careful and careless, sifted through methods and results. The conversation shifted away from magic angle concrete impacts into something more revealing. What happens when a striker-fired pistol is staged right on the cliff, just shy of release, and then gets disturbed by the kind of flex and torsion a real holster, a sprint to cover, or a scuffle can create? This isn't some YouTuber's party trick. It's the next layer of the P320 story that SIG would love everyone to stop asking about. The uncomfortable part for the brand is simple. The more you look at real mechanical stacks, the less room there is for slogans. Enter the SEAR movement test. For months, SIG-friendly corners rolled their eyes and waved it away as nonsense. Then the FBI's ballistic research facility put their stamp on it in August 2024 and noted a problem. That single line in a federal report moved the goalposts. You can nitpick methods all day, but when the Bureau says it can make a gun burp without a trigger press under specific inputs, the burden shifts off the skeptics. A channel called 3 P320s in a trench coat walked through the steps with primed cases and tried to force the exact result. Chamber, hold vertical, nudge the sear in tiny bites. No bang. Add the slide frame compression described in the document. Run cycles, vary force. Still no bang. The host didn't throw up his hands and scream conspiracy. He explained a very plausible pathway. Repeated manipulations can feed force backward through the trigger bar and safety lever at just the wrong timing, momentarily defeating the striker block. That isn't fantasy. Anyone who's polished sear faces or tuned connector angles knows how a couple thousandths and a few degrees of timing decide if energy goes where it should. One technician can graze the line and nothing happens. Another applies a hair more force after 100 repetitions, and suddenly the safety stack pivots into the danger zone. Two things can be true at once. A federal lab captured a failure condition on paper, and an independent couldn't coax his sample into duplicating it on command while following the steps. That shouldn't soothe SIG. It should terrify them. Tolerance stacks aren't identical. Surface finishes vary. Springs age. Aftermarket parts shift geometry in ways that ripple through the entire safety chain. One gun will fail in a rack at Agency A and behave perfectly on a bench at Agency B. Meanwhile, The presence of a bureau report hangs over every courtroom like a thunderhead, and marketing spin won't chase it away. When a company's answer to that storm is polished talking points about proper handling, you're not hearing confidence in the design. You're hearing a legal department trying to run out the clock. While SIG parsed statements, TriggerSmart did what the community demanded. More guns. Cleaner process, they lined up Glock 19 Gen 5, Glock 43X, M&P 2.0, Walther PDP, Springfield Hellcat and Echelon, Taurus G3 Tactical, a hammer-fired Beretta PX4 Storm, and more. Then ran primed case checks in 3 buckets. First, drops and mallet strikes with untouched triggers. Nothing fired. That cuts the legs out from the lazy, tap it and it detonates panic line. Then they did slide rocking and frame taps with 0 trigger input. Still nothing. The interesting part came when they staged each gun right at the edge of break, then agitated the slide to see if micro-movement would shove the system over. The setup mimics a real-life recipe: aggressive retention holster pressure, a slide shoved slightly out of battery by a rigid mouth, or body weight pinning the gun against a seatbelt buckle while the carrier twists out of a vehicle. Patterns popped. Several striker-fired pistols could be teased into a release in that narrow window. The PDP left light primer kisses. Energy and travel weren't there under that setup. The hammer-fired PX4 behaved like an adult because its hammer rides the frame while the striker block lives with the slide, which changes how torsion and flex move through the system. The P320 sample was pre-upgrade and wearing an Apex trigger bar, exactly the sort of tolerance cocktail that can nibble away at safety margins, and it still needed more than the famous 1 millimeter of pre-input to ignite. Other strikers took multiple tries, and at least one kept giving pre-ignition clicks without enough energy to dent the primer properly. This doesn't crown a new king or absolve any brand. It proves the core claim: stage a striker close enough to the edge, disturb the stack just right, and you can get a hit. The size of the safety window, how much pre-travel and how much disturbance, is the part that matters for real life. On that metric, the P320's history hasn't exactly inspired confidence, and the company's habit of treating customer concerns like a PR inconvenience hasn't helped. Here's the mechanical reality SIG would rather you ignore. In a striker pistol, the trigger bar lifts the block before the sear frees the striker. That sequencing assumes a straight-line pull and parts meeting in the right order. Reality adds holsters that press and twist, sweat-thickened debris in striker channels that delay return springs, connectors and bars with slightly improved engagement angles, and blocks that have lost a hair of preload after a season of carry. Now hold the sear a breath off the wall and nudge the slide. Suddenly, those tiny variances have room to ruin your day. The block that should be fully clear is only mostly clear. The striker that should be fully contained has just enough path to kiss a primer. None of that is destiny, it's probability. Some designs leave you a lot of cushion before you hit the edge. Some designs offer less cushion than the brochure implies. Guess which category the P320 keeps getting shoved into by real-world events and independent benches? The company line tries to paint this as a training problem. Keep your finger off the trigger. Use a quality holster, and all will be well. Finger discipline and good holsters matter. They do not cure geometry that gives up margin the moment a part wears, flexes, or gets nudged by the wrong pressure point. That's why hammer guns shrugged off TriggerSmart's edge jostle routine. Their relationships live on the frame. Their blocks don't get bullied by slide flex the same way. And the sear hammer dynamic is more resistant to that particular disturbance. If SIG wants to keep insisting that everything downstream is a user issue, they can. But they should expect the market to notice the brands that solved this class of problem without lecturing customers. The legal and political horizon should also worry anyone still trying to hand-wave this away. The FBI wrote down a condition that matters. Agencies read those words and act conservatively, not because they're engineers, but because administrators hate risk. Insurers hate it even more. The moment a memo circulates inside a department, procurement tilts toward the path of least drama. That's not a referendum on the Second Amendment. It's the bland machinery of institutions protecting themselves. The only way a manufacturer beats that tide is by over-delivering on safety margins so completely that the conversation dries up. Public arguments about proper angles and selectively edited videos only reinforce the impression that the design is still threading the needle. So here's the practical part for people who carry guns every day and don't want to be unpaid beta testers. If you carry a P320, confirm the factory upgrade. Then think very carefully before bolting in aftermarket bars, shoes, or springs. That's sweet. Short reset you love on a timer trims safety margin you can't see. Keep striker channels clean and dry so the block isn't wading through sludge. Prove your holster with the actual gun. Pinch, twist, press. Make sure the shell or retention hardware isn't introducing side load at weird places. If you're running a dot, check that plate screws aren't dragging the slide and changing how the block resets. Armorers should add one simple routine to the schedule, with a primed case and a safe trap. Stage the system at the edge and confirm jostle doesn't create a click. It's boring. It's also grown-up gun ownership. And if a particular sample shows repeated edge weirdness, retire it from duty carry. Sentiment is cheap compared to liability. If you're picking a carry gun right now, lean toward models that have years of quiet duty time without a trail of settlements and agency memos. Stay stock or as close as you can if the gun protects lives. Keep maintenance real and regular. Use rigid holsters that truly block the trigger and don't introduce leverage in strange places. Test for interference after every change. New optic plate, new light, new holster. Cycle the slide. Ride the gun in the holster through a full day of normal movement and feel for spots that pinch or bind. A minute of garage-level due diligence can save you from learning about tolerance stacks at the worst possible moment. There's also an obvious path the industry should take, and it doesn't involve update standard tests to include off-axis impacts and controlled edge-of-break disturbances. Build fixtures that apply slide frame compression in measured amounts. Then cycle through thousands of repetitions while logging every primer tap on a test block. Publish tolerance windows that reflect real production variants, not fantasy CAD numbers. Welcome well-designed aftermarket parts into the validation suite instead of pretending customers won't install them. The brands that do this will keep winning contracts and civilian loyalty. The brands that don't will keep hiring PR to mop up after engineers. Everyone knows which side of that divide SIG has been on throughout this saga. Let's be blunt. Guns do not decide to fire. Mechanisms respond to inputs. Some inputs are obvious. Others are ugly combinations of flex, friction, and timing that a CAD model didn't predict, especially after the owner improved the feel with a bag of parts. That isn't a hall pass for bad engineering and soft language like SIG's voluntary upgrade. It's a call to test better and design with margin so nonsense doesn't creep in at the edges. So what did we learn? The P320's 2017 drop fire embarrassment wasn't a one-off. The FBI's 2024 SEAR movement finding turned a YouTube argument into official business, and the 2025 multi-gun benchwork proved edge-of-break behavior isn't confined to one brand, though some brands keep flirting closer to the cliff. Do you think SIG has earned back the trust they burned? Or does the P320 still represent a design with margins that are too thin for duty and defense? Drop your take in the comments. Then hit like. Share this with your range crew, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.